The reality of spraying, and not just in mangoes but in all crops, is that there's a real temptation to travel too fast. And when you spray too fast to allow the spray time to penetrate the canopy, the sprays will tend to deposit on the outside. In many cases, that's all you need to do. So if your problems are on the outside of the tree, so you've got lots of young growth and you might have fungicide flowering and young growth on the outside of the tree, often that's what you're trying to target with sprays. And often you can do a very effective job just by spraying the outside of the tree. However, in many cases, you need to get some spray into the inside of the tree, and you may find that you need to radically change the way that you spray. So increasing spray volume is one way that you can increase coverage, but it's not the only way, and it's not the most reliable way. Often it's better to adjust your travel speed and the way that your air profiles the canopy to give penetration. In reality, canopies that are too dense, and an overly dense canopy is anyone that shows block shading at midday underneath the trees. If you can't see any sunflex, then it's really too dense to reliably spray. And what we find is that trees which have sufficient light penetration to give good return bloom, to give good fruit colour, and basically trees which are horticulturally efficient are also ideal for spraying as well. And if the canopy starts to get too dense, there's very little that we can do to seriously improve spray coverage. But however, remember this, that some sprays are quite effective on the outside of the canopy and we can go reasonably fast and get away with it. But if you come under pressure for inner canopy required sprays or high coverage efficiency sprays, you maybe have to be prepared to slow down, increase your volume, change your output distribution, change your nozzle angles, and there's a lot that we can do to improve coverage if we know what we're looking to try and achieve. So the first thing I look at is the spray going to hit the target? And then the next thing I look at is, are there any gaps in the output? So if I turn one of these nozzles off, there would be a visible gap in the output. What you want to do is see a nice even plume of spray going right across the canopy. You want to get the volumes in the right place to maximise the potential deposits. And it sounds like the setup's really good there. If you're going to run fine droplet nozzles, you have to have a decent inline pressure filter, and it's got to have a decent mesh on it. How often do you check that?
I flush it every spraying.
By turning the tap on?
Yeah.
Okay, so turning the tap on doesn't, it helps, but it doesn't clean it completely. And these things, if they're well lubed, should be just past finger tight. It's usually at the end of a spray round on a property, we'll actually recommend that people take it off, give it a rinse, and lube. If you put a bit of silicone grease on there or just a bit of ordinary grease, you can do them so they're just past finger tight. So the whole business of undoing filters isn't an ordeal. It should be actually quite an easy thing to do. But it amazes me how often we'll actually come onto a property and find that the mesh is blown in these, and they've ceased to be a suction pressure filter because most of the spray is going through the hole rather than through. If you block these things, and it's quite easy to block them because they've got quite small holes in them, it's quite often just one of the slots that blocks, and you've gone to 50% of the output from the nozzle. And I challenge anybody to have two nozzles side by side, one of them putting out half as much spray, and actually to be able to see it visually. You just can't see it when the air's on. So getting that part of the recipe right is a really important part of using fine droplet nozzles. You need to be sensitive to the type of canopy that you're spraying and to the range of canopies that might be present on your orchard. And I have more experience in spraying avocados than mangoes, and I know that avocado trees go through quite a transition as they grow and mature. And what we find with avocados, when they're mature and planted at relatively large trees, similar to the mangoes behind us or a little bit bigger, they tend to hollow out and they become much easier to spray than they were 2 or 3 years before that, when they had leaf from the outer canopy right through to the inner trunk. And so there's a stage in the growth of an avocado canopy where they're quite difficult to spray, and you need to be prepared to slow down to effectively cover that inner canopy leaf and fruit. And it's going to be the same with mangoes. If the canopy is very dense, you're going to have to slow down to be able to spray it more effectively. So you need to be prepared to adjust the way you run your sprayer for the density of the canopy, the size of the canopy, and the distance you have to throw the spray in terms of the row spacing that that tree is planted on.
So this is water with blue food colouring in it.
Yep.
And this is much bigger than a spray droplet. But it's just showing the behaviour of the droplet on the surface of the plant. So the underside of a mango leaf is much harder to wet than the top side, because it's obviously waxier and a little bit more water repellent for whatever reason. So these droplets, if they've just got water in them, don't retain very well. You know, they tend not to stick, so you can see where they've smeared across the surface. And so this is a standard non-ionic surfactant, which is what you'll find in almost all formulated product. What you can hopefully see there is it's spreading quite a lot more. It doesn't have the seep contact angles. It's covering quite a lot more surface area, and it's slowly moving. So while the other ones, pure water just tends to sit there, with a bit of surfactant in there, as you'll find in most formulated agrochemical products, you'll get a lot more spreading. So typically you'll get 4 to 6 times the wetted area. Droplets behave a lot better when they've got some wetting agent in them in terms of adhesion, retention, spreading. So this is a super spreader that's formulated for horticultural use, so it's not a penetrant, it's a spreader. So if I whilst that's wet with the right loading of surfactant in there, it'll just keep moving across the surface of the plant. So you can see what's happening there where 2 of those droplets are coalesced as it's starting to run. So the problem with the super spreaders is if you put them on in high volumes, you'll get lots of runoff. If you put them on in low volumes, you can get absolutely stunning spray coverage. So that's 5 squirts with a little mister. You can see discrete wetted, this is water only, you can see discrete wetted areas starting to run. It's running on the top surface, it's not really running on the bottom surface. So there's a coalescence of spray, but you can see there's still gaps between the cover. And it's wetted, but it's a bit ugly. But the point is that with fine droplets, you get much better wetting than you do with big droplets. Okay, so that's 6 or 7 squirts. You can see we've got much more spread wetting effect. It's wet to run off. You can see the chemical moving down the veins of the leaf on the top surface and starting to coalesce and move on the bottom surface. So it's a much thinner, finer deposit as a result of having a standard wetting agent in there, which is what you'd hope from a formulated product.